Pistols are an important part of any sandbox, and in a game like Fallout, that's something that could be your primary weapon, especially with the perks in that game. Now, sadly, in the vanilla game, pistols are pretty few and far between. You've got the 10mm, the pipe pistols, and the Deliverer, and that's about it. There's not really many ballistic pistols available, so today we're going to be checking out a lot of recent releases that all happen to be pistols. So if you're looking for a new pistol mod for your load order, this might be a great stop for you, because this is going to include some new and maybe some not very well seen mods that may be perfect for your load order. And we're going to be starting off with a very, very classic weapon known as Those Guns / PKD Blasters by Diakyuto. Essentially, this is going to be a recreation of that gun, or the 223 pistol from the past Fallout games. Now, what's really cool about these is they have some pretty interesting changes to make them a bit more interesting and a bit more different from other mods out there that try to recreate the same weapons. Now, you'll notice that this mod is called Those Guns instead of That Gun, and that's because there's two different weapons in this mod. One of which is going to be a 223 pistol, just like the classic one that was featured in New Vegas and some of the other past Fallout games as well. But there's also another version of this weapon known as the 357 pistol. It's going to be the same sort of profile. It's going to have a different color scheme though, and it's going to be chambered in 357 instead of 223. Now I know what you're thinking. 357 and 223 are not going to be standard ammo types for Fallout 4. Well, that's because they aren't. So this mod is going to require munitions if you want it to have the correct ammo types. That being said, Diakyuto did make multiple files, so if you don't like munitions and you want to use the vanilla ammos, there are different versions you can use. That will rechamber the 223 pistol into 5.56, which is kind of fine because that's what that gun was chambered in Fallout New Vegas. And the 357 pistol has been chambered in 38 instead. It's really cool that each of these pistols, while having the same sort of profile, is going to have a totally different look. They're going to have a different aesthetic on the different metals and trim pieces, but also the glowing bits on each of these guns is going to have different colored lights, which is pretty cool. This weapon does technically have custom animations, as they are modified versions of the original revolver to make them fit this weapon better, since it doesn't have a hammer that has been completely removed and is going to now have sort of a different style of the same reload. This weapon also comes with really cool custom sounds, including the classic sound when you reload the weapon with the beam and lights charging up. Additionally, each of these weapons is added to the level list. The 357 pistol, or 38 if you're using vanilla, will spawn on Minutemen, Gunners, and Raider bosses, all after level 10, and the 223 pistol will spawn on Brotherhood Scribes and Railroad Agents after level 18, and additionally, Minutemen after level 25, a completely separate leveled list for them. There's also a handful of mat swaps and attachments over at the weapons workbench, more than we've seen for most of the 223/That Gun mods, but still not as much as a typical mod, because this is a very funky weapon and it's kind of hard to modify. I would like to see a little bit more, maybe some muzzle devices like suppressors or compensators, but at the very least we have some grips, barrel options, some different scopes, and mat swaps, so that's pretty cool. There's also a handful of receiver changes to help you change the performance of this weapon. Overall, a pretty cool little combo pack. You get two really cool pistols, both of which are reminiscent of some older weapons from the past games that are very, very nice. And of course, being inspired by Blade Runner and the blaster from that movie. But moving on to something a bit more grounded, we have the Doombased Desert Eagle Reborn by Diakyuto. This is going to be a completely new overhaul and redux of the original Doombased Deagle, the first Deagle that we ever got for Fallout 4, so you may have seen this one. This was a classic back in the day. It was definitely the Deagle that everybody used because we didn't have anything else. There have been some amazing new Deagle entries since then, but this one is going to attempt to revitalize it and redux it to be a bit more in line with some modern mods. The first notable change is going to be a complete redux of the animations, brand new animations by Cadaver that are going to be applied to this Deagle instead of the classic ones, which I believe were just using the Deliverer animations. There's also going to be a complete overhaul of the attachments, a redesign of all of the skins so that now you can have a bunch of different looks to this thing, including different engraved versions as well as different material swaps. Overall, this is just going to add a bit more content to the original mod, so if you liked the look of that Deagle, then you might like this mod a whole lot, because it's going to take that same look, add a bunch of more options at the weapons workbench, and add some other changes like the custom animations as well as level list integration. This thing will start spawning on Brotherhood soldiers, Raider bosses, Gunner bosses, Triggermen, which is a really nice touch, and Railroad Agents at level 20. Minutemen will then start getting it after level 30. This weapon is chambered in 44, so it has no need for any ammo type mods, because this thing is going to use vanilla ammos, which is always a nice touch for those of you who don't want to have to download another requirement for this thing. Quite frankly, the only thing this mod requires is the Far Harbor DLC, and that's because it uses the Far Harbor suppressor for some reason. That one is surprising to me. I'm in contact with Diakyuto quite often. They could easily use a big suppressor of mine, but they decided to use that one, so you are going to need Far Harbor. But at this day in Fallout 4's lifecycle, I would assume Far Harbor is not really a requirement that matters too much to most people. Overall, a really cool redux of a classic mod. A really good looking deagle now on really great animations, with some other tweaks that make this weapon a nice thing to use. So if you want to try this one out, it'll be linked down in the description with all the other mods we talk about in this video. The next mod is going to be a bit more out there, something original. We're checking out the N88 10mm pistol by Arabot96. This is going to be a redesign of the 10mm pistol, be something a bit more compact and a bit more interesting. It still has a very, very Fallout aesthetic to it. It's going to be a lot smaller, which is something I know a lot of people want from the 10mm pistol, because the one in the vanilla game is quite frankly huge. This mod features a really cool, sleek design, but still calls back to some of the original Fallout design elements, and this also applies to all of the attachments as well. Overall, a really, really cool looking pistol. This weapon does make use of deliverer animations, but honestly, they fit perfectly. This looks really, really good on those animations, but it also means that you can reanimate it if you're using any deliverer reanimation mods. Now, something to note about this mod is that it has two different versions depending on what you want. This thing can be a standalone weapon, so it'll be a new 10mm pistol added to the game, or you can have it as a replacer. So if you truly do hate the 10mm and you like this one a lot better, you can have it replace it completely, and this will be found instead. Alternatively, you can have it on its own, and if you have it as a standalone, then it will have some other forms of integration, including the ability to craft it at the chemistry station and leveled list injection. If you do decide to go the leveled list injection route, then it will spawn at level 1, just like the vanilla 10mm pistol, and it will just be found as a sister weapon that will have similar stats and a similar setup in general. Overall, a wonderful new weapon if you're looking for a new pistol for your game, something that's very lore-friendly and fits the aesthetic of Fallout very well. For a completely original design, I think this one is fantastic, and Arabot has been doing some really cool work lately, so I can't wait to see what else they decide to do in the future. Now, if you're a fan of the reduxes of old mods, then you may like this next one. We have the Rhino M1 Redux, again, by Diakyuto. Way back in the day, we had a weapon known as the Rhino M1 by Doom. This is another Doom Redux, a huge pistol with 3 shots. This thing was absolutely massive. Well, the same treatment that was given to the Deagle has been given to this weapon here. A complete redux of the weapon, overhauling the way that it works at the weapon's workbench, completely redesigning the way that the attachments work with it altogether, and also adding a ton of new attachments that weren't available before. Additionally, putting this thing on custom animations instead of the classic 44. These new animations fit this thing way better since it is a massive revolver. It is making use of the 4570 animations from the hunting revolver mod. Speaking of which, this weapon is chambered in 4570, so this thing packs a wallop. All of the bright, flashy colors have been ripped out of the original mod, so now when you find this weapon, you'll find it in a nice flat gray. But if you do like those flashy colors, you can still equip them over at the weapon's workbench if you choose to. But you will not be forced to see these really bright and gaudy camos out in the wild. Now, by far, the biggest change to this weapon is going to be those animations. That makes a huge difference for me. This weapon was not something I usually used in my load order because it was a bit out there and didn't quite fit the aesthetic of the rest of my game, but the animation changes are definitely huge, and also the choice to make this into a new flat gray design instead of the really bright camos is also very important to me as well. On top of that, all of the different attachments that we can now attach to this weapon are really cool, allowing for greater customization and of course just more ways to use this weapon, which is always a huge plus in my book. Now thankfully, this thing is also added to the level list, so if you do decide to use this, it will be integrated into your game, and it'll start spawning on Brotherhood soldiers, high-level gunners, vendors, trappers, and raider disciples at level 30, which is going to be pretty much all over the place. The trapper inclusion is a pretty interesting one indeed, but that's because it uses 4570, which is pretty notable over in Far Harbor. Altogether, a pretty cool redux of a classic weapon. If you want a new heavy revolver or maybe a new hero weapon, this is something I'd consider. It looks really cool on the new animations, and altogether, it's just a really nice weapon. So if you want to try it out, you should go ahead and do so. And that takes us to our last mod of the day, and that's going to be probably the wackiest one of them all, even after that last revolver we just checked out. We're looking at the Halo M6 Magnum by Arabot96. Now, don't be confused here. This is going to be the Halo Magnum from Halo, but it's been completely redesigned. It has been made from scratch by Arabot and has some interesting new attachments that make it pretty dang cool, and almost, I'd say, fitting in Fallout. Now, you can recreate the classic Magnum from Halo 1. You can also make the Halo 2 Magnum, and you can also make the Magnum from Halo ODST. thanks to all the attachments available in this mod. Honestly, I really like the way that this mod was set up. I think Arbot did an amazing job of combining all of the designs into one modifiable piece, and it all just works in a way that I never expected it to, and I'm really, really happy with that. As a Halo fan myself, I think this is one of the coolest approaches to a Magnum I've ever seen. And not only do you have all the classic attachments to make all of the different variants from the past games, there's also some new attachments that are really cool, like the brand new reflex sight and some laser attachments that are just really neat and make the weapon pop a whole lot more. And I like the design overall a lot. I really, really like it. And it even comes with custom animations, which is very, very different for a weapon of this nature. Additionally, there's a handful of skins to get different skins from the different Halo games. That makes this also really cool. In my personal opinion, even though it is a Halo weapon, I think this fits pretty well in the sandbox, especially with certain setups and attachments. With certain skins and certain parts combos, it honestly just looks like a pretty cool sci-fi pistol, something that could fit well in Fallout, maybe even as a power armor pistol, since this thing does use 50 caliber ammunition. It's going to pack a huge punch, so as a power armor pistol, this thing actually makes a good bit of sense. On top of the really cool animations and the custom attachments that are all really nice, this thing also has leveled-less injection. It'll start spawning at level 40, a pretty high-level gun, which makes sense, it is 50 cal, and can be bought from most merchants. Overall, a really wonderful approach on making a Halo weapon in Fallout 4 sandbox with the customizable attachments. This thing is really cool. Honestly, I'd love to see something like this in Halo. Arbot did a great job, and it looks really, really nice. With that though, let's go ahead and start wrapping things up. If you want to try any of these mods, they will all be linked down in the description below. And if you'd like to support my work directly, whether it's the videos I make here on YouTube or the mods I make over on the Nexus, you can do so using the link down in the description to check me out on Patreon. Of course though, that is completely optional. By no means do you need to feel like you need to. Once again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, consider dropping a like. It really helps out the channel, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace!